We can speak now to Ilan Kelman, who's a professor of disasters and health at University College London. Professor, thank you so much for your time. If you don't mind, just to get an idea whether we're going to continue this conversation very much based specifically on what you know about what's happening in Türkiye or generally your area of expertise. So we're now just over 2 weeks after those first two huge earthquakes. What have you observed from your point of view and your expertise about what's happening in southeastern Turkey? Let's leave Syria aside for the moment because it might be a very different situation.
The horrible situation is that all of this was known. The disaster did not have to happen. The people did not have to die. So the horrific part is that this is simply the same repetitious story that we've seen again and again and again and again. So number one is that the buildings did not have to collapse. And we saw those scenes with the horrific piles of rubble, but surrounded by other buildings which were standing up. And as the reporter said, people do have faith in one of the agencies because those buildings survived many of the earthquakes. But then afterwards, the delays in aid when it was known that it was a catastrophe, and the people suffering in the same way that people have suffered in previous disasters. The real baseline for us is the absolutely horrible part that we know what has to be done to stop disasters. We know what has to be done to help people after disasters, and it's just the same mistakes being repeated.
In terms of the timeline since the earthquakes and the way people are being taken care of, the assistance that they're being given, the accommodations that they're being provided, where are we and how much more needs to happen?
Well, right now they need assistance, and the best that international people can do is to donate money to credible organizations. Again, one mistake which is commonly made after a disaster is people want to donate goods. And they will give their old clothes, which may or may not be useful. They may give food which the people who are affected aren't going to want to eat. And then, of course, there's the logistics of getting goods from the person donating to the people affected. So those who are in the disaster zone know best. They know what they want, and that requires money in order to purchase it either locally or otherwise. We are still in winter in the affected regions. There could be freezing temperatures at any point, and they are continuing. So what do people need? Well, they absolutely need food, water, shelter, and warmth. At this point, they also need some sense of getting back to kids in school, people being able to work, having fulfilling and healthy lives day to day. And the way things have been going right now, that's very challenging. So it is urgent to ensure that we are educating the kids, we are dealing with the trauma, we are recovering the bodies, giving people the space and time to grieve for the people and communities that they've lost, while working with them to plan for the reconstruction, not just charging ahead and saying, oh, well, I want to build here, so I'm going to do that. Fundamentally, disasters are about people, and the people who are affected need to know that they are being respected and being consulted.
Yeah, it's interesting that you mentioned children and getting children back into school. Are you suggesting that possibly in situations like this that temporary structures need to be put up just so that people have some sense of belonging to an area and being able to at least live some sort of normality, like leave their tent to be able to meet other people, to be able to go and get a drink of tea somewhere, to be part of a neighborhood so that their children can be at school with other children, where they can begin to at least see the world in a different way away from the disaster? Temporary structures like this will surely have to be something that comes in a few weeks or in a few months, don't you think? Because the immediate concern being just to keep people alive.
It's partly what you're saying, but partly is the fact that we should be ready for disasters like this. And we are ready the 2 weeks after the earthquake struck. So kids should already be in school. There should already be the food and the water and the hygiene and the health needs, those supply lines. The fact that those are still being put up and that people are still struggling for their day-to-day needs, again, just shows that we haven't learned the lessons. So exactly what you're saying, these temporary structures for school, for community, for work. I mean, all this is in the guidelines, all this is in the manuals, all this is given in the trainings, and yet it's not being done, so there are delays. This is a concern. People have gone through horror. We know what to do to help them, And yet still there are delays, still there are problems. It's still what we've seen so many times before. It's still not applying what everyone is being trained to do, but the resources, the political support, and the interest to help the people affected has very much been lacking.
Professor, in your experience, again, in situations like this, do people who leave disaster zones, do many of them come back? This area covers 110,000 square kilometers, which is the size of a country like Cuba, for example, or Bulgaria. Because so much has been destroyed, there will have been generations who have built up their contacts and their family systems across so many years. There may be a chance that socially and culturally, southeastern Turkey may never be the same again, do you think? Because people won't come back. They won't re-establish those ties.
And there's also been generations who've been wiped out, who've been killed. In Turkey, over 40,000 people are dead, and that number is going to rise. This shatters communities. This destroys families and wider networks. What we do find is that people are different and there's simply no one size fits all. So some people are saying, get me out of here, I'm gone. And they may have the money, they may have the passports, they may have the links to simply turn up in another country and start again. For others, their location, their community is their life. It's their livelihood, it's their lifeblood. This is why we cannot go in and say, oh, do this and rebuild here, and you're out of here and you're moving. Instead, we have to ensure that people are getting what they want, and it varies because people are different. So those who want to rebuild immediately, let's help them. Those who need time for body recovery, to bring out their irreplaceable possessions from the collapsed building, who simply want to visit the place, the rubble where they've lost loved ones, they deserve that time. Others who may say, well, I need to move to Istanbul or Ankara or out of the country, again, giving that support. These are the people who've lost everything. It's up to us, it's incumbent on us to ensure that we're not trying to sweep away their experiences, that we're not trying to destroy their experiences, but instead help them recover and continue their lives and livelihoods in the way that matters most to them, not to us.
Professor Ilan Kelman, I cannot thank you enough. Really appreciate your contribution.